One more question. Who
Yeah.
facilitates the internships? Like, could you just walk us through how a student would
Sure,
go through the
absolutely.
process?
So there are several processes. First, I actually have a whole handout on steps that I can send out. First, they have to talk to their administrator or counselor about the program, or perhaps the counselor would bring it up with them. They have to have a signature sign-off from the school. So they have to meet those eligibility requirements that should be at the bottom of your page. The counselor or the principal would say, okay, they have the 2.5 GPA, they have the 95% attendance rate, which we're a little bit flexible on. Once they meet the criteria and they sign off, the parents have to sign off, they fill out the application, then they come to us and we do a little interview with them. So that's what I'm in the process of doing with my students right now. I'm interviewing them, finding out exactly what they want, what sports they're involved in, what do we have to work around? Is it basketball? Is it volleyball? Is it track? Is it track and cross country? What do we need to work around to make it happen? Then we look at our list of employers or possible employers and say who might be a match. We reach out to the employer. We say, hey, we have this student. We think it would be a good match. They either say great or no. They might say, does the student have a resume, which we're hearing a couple of times. So it's really great to encourage students to have resumes by their junior year of high school if they don't. Then we set up the interview. They interview. If all works out well, the employer signs off on it, the student signs off on it, the parent signs off on it, and then we set up their schedule to start. And they go right into it. They can do it in the summer. They can do it in the fall. They can do it in the spring. The state of Ohio, actually this past year has a program where an employer would get reimbursed for what they paid the student. They're in talks to have it continue again next year, but we're not for certain that will happen. But in all likelihood, we are being told that it will. So thanks, Diana, for those questions.
I have a couple of questions
Yeah.
also. And you may have said this and I missed it, but what is the range of different industries for the internships?
So we have our normal types of programs that you're familiar with, the auto tech, construction, education, environment, health, beauty, all those types of things. But the student that comes to us for the elite program has not been a Toll student. So they, if they're interested in nursing, they don't already have their STNA, they don't have any credentialing that they would have already gotten from Tolls. So they will come to us and say, this is what I'm interested in. So we have a student, I'll just use examples because that's the best way to talk about it. He's interested in construction. His dad has been in construction, but he plans on going to college, a 4-year institution, but he wants to get some experience and he wants to work in the field of his choosing. So he is more interested in, say, construction management, which is a very popular field in central Ohio right now. And so, am I answering your question? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, good. So we have actually Setterland Construction. I can say their name. I can't say the student's name, but they've been a great partner in hosting students in a variety of capacities. We have students that are interested in technology, a lot of technology, and businesses are always looking for high school talent that they can count on. Sometimes they get students that just want to see, they come in for an hour here and there. It is very different because they're actually getting work out of it. Pretty much you name a field, if it's amenable, we can make it happen. My boss likes to say it's not flipping burgers and it's not, it's not a job that the students could have gone out and gotten on their own. That's the point. So they're not just working at Chipotle. They're not bagging groceries at the grocery store because they could get that on their own. What we want is a career experience for them to learn about what might be a future option open to them.
Thanks. Yeah. And my last question, and you might not be able to answer this right now, but I'm just curious what some of the differences are between, you said there's no duplication.
Right.
So I'm wondering what some of the differences are between a program like the Young Professionals Academy versus the Elite Shadowing Experience.
Yeah. So, and Dublin actually has a little bit of a co-op program. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but three main differences. One, we find the experience for the student. I know with YPA and the other program, it is on the onus is on the student to go out and find the experience for themselves. Secondly, the big difference is time. That 10-hour week commitment really builds. We've met with Dublin Chamber of Commerce, we've met with Union County Chamber of Commerce, and what they are hearing from businesses is if the student is going to come in and they are going to get anything out of it as a business, the student needs to actually put in more hours at a business than, say, I know when my daughter did YPA, it was just, like she left at lunchtime, she was there 45 minutes to an hour, and she came back. That she could see what was being done, but she was of no help to them. That's my personal experience. But the timing. And then what I mentioned earlier, the supervisory aspect, because we're in communication with the employer and the students and the parents throughout the semester to make sure that nothing is going off the rails, that they're showing up, they're doing their job, they're improving, they're learning, because that's what we want everyone to get out of it. That help? Anything else? All right. Well, I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kim. We don't have anyone signed up for public participation, so Board of Education committees. Anyone have anything to note? All right. Student representative update.
Hello, everyone. My name is Frankie Wilkins. I am the Kaufman representative. I'm very excited to be speaking at my first meeting and excited to be the senior representative for Kaufman next year. Currently, right now, fall sports have started up their practice at all three high schools, getting us up nice and early, putting us to work. Scioto and Jerome are both starting the process of installing new turf in their stadiums, and many students this past week helped work and also attended the Memorial Tournament in Dublin. This Wednesday, a community lantern release will also be held in honor of Jerome student Ethan Blecky. That's all I have right now.
And if I could take just a quick moment, we would love to introduce and say thank you to two of our four student board representatives are here for their what might be last meeting. So we've got Keegan and Maria. Could you guys come up just for a quick second? Cadence and Srinath were not able to be here today, but we just wanted to say thank you, give you a small token of appreciation for your work.
Thank you both. And Maria, when we get our license plates, we expect you to come back as the one who helped spearhead that process. Thank you guys for everything. Yeah, that would be great.
I'm currently trying to get my cut back from one of my children, so it really, they take them. I don't know. If they don't give them out, then you don't get them, so it's a thing.
Just pick a side, John. You're the odd man out.
Do you want to come in front of me?
There you go.
Happy family.
Okay, all right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Thank you.
Don't be, you have to come back at breaks. You guys have to come back.
It's very exciting.
I'm looking forward to seeing where
We need to bug, in that group, because at Christmas, they make me take them to lunch. I know. So.
Good luck on everything.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Yes, it'll go out.
All right, reports and action items from the superintendent's office.
Okay, just a couple updates, and I am so encouraged by the community interest and questions that have been generated by the Planning Next focus groups. I know as board members, you've asked multiple questions because people are also asking you about where we are in this process. We wrapped up 21, Cassie, 23 different focus groups, and we have a meeting tomorrow with Planning Next to kind of get their preliminary information. My hope is to have Planning Next at the first board meeting in August so that the public hears the information from the focus groups, gets the breakdown on the different groups. None of this is being kept secret. It is something that I believe everybody needs to hear what the community is saying as we chart a path forward. Also, as we go through this process, we had 4 or 5 different options that were talked about in the focus groups with Planning Next. The hope is to narrow that down to 2 or 3 different options, to get those options out and explain everything to the public before we do the surveys and the polling, so that people have a deeper understanding about what we're asking them when it comes down to how do we want to deal as a community with increasing high school enrollment in particular right now. So if we can get Planning Next year at the first meeting in August, we can take a month getting information out to the community, and then we'll be able to put a poll in the field, put a survey in the field, and gather that information. At the same time, Mr. Stark is meeting both with Planning and Zoning. I'll be going to Planning and Zoning in the near future to explain our purpose for the Cardinal Health Building. We're also beginning the process of working with code officials to ensure that if we move forward with this purchase, the building can be made so it's applicable for educational space, the whole building. We believe we can, just making sure that all of those different things are in place. So 2 simultaneous tracks. As we said, our due diligence portion for the Cardinal Building, the clock started ticking in May. So we still have 11 months as we go through this process to ensure that, 1, if this is what the community wants to support, and 2, this is something that we can put into a commercial space as we get it zoned and coded for educational purposes. City stuff and our summer partnerships are up and going. I'd like to thank City Manager O'Callahan and Mayor Ambrose Grooms for hosting the Business Advisory Council meeting at the Memorial Tournament on Wednesday. It's always great to be able to have our business partners come together, our communications team, have that last BAC meeting in the Villa during the Pro-Am. Great setting, great opportunity for all of us to come together. Also like to thank Mr. Stark and his team for the work that they did in partnering with the Memorial Tournament. The drone show was a huge hit. I was at the Visit Dublin board meeting today when they were talking about not only the size of the crowd there, but the size of the crowd that watched online and the number of inquiries already about that drone show on Thursday during the Memorial Tournament. We were able to launch from Sells Middle School's field. It requires a lot of coordination. You can't just say, go ahead and put a couple hundred drones out there without security and liability insurance and all of those operational things in place. So we were proud to be able to host that. And thanks to Jeff for all of the work that went into that. And in a couple weeks, we will be hosting Martina McBride at Kaufman High School and the city's 4th of July celebration. It's always, again, such a great example of what happens when a community comes together and plans. Great time to be in Dublin, from the tournament all the way through all the events at Forfest. And now we get ready and gear up for the 4th of July. I saw the email today that came from Mrs. Ewert as we get the bus ready for the parade. in all of those festivities that we get to participate in. Committee structure for 24-25. Janet's working hard to get that calendar together, which we will get out in late July for all of the members of the different committees. Again, regular cadence will take place. A couple things that we're shifting this year. Key communicators, which had always been part of Mr. Baker's portfolio and then slid kind of to me, is going to slide to Mrs. Dietrich as she will lead that key communicators efforts. It doesn't mean that they won't see me. It just means that Cassie will be the one that puts everything together, gets the agendas together. And also, Dr. Schwanke and I have been meeting with our parent equity leads internally at the district as we get that parent piece together, the district piece together, the building pieces together to make sure that everything's in a manner that everyone knows what everyone's role is and we provide clarity. This is one of those areas that we haven't quite gotten right, but we keep trying and we're committed to making sure that we do get it right. With ultimately, we focus back on Journey 2030, which we'll talk about here in a second, and the focus is on our student experience. In just a little bit, you're going to see updates on our Journey 2030 goals. I love the annual goals part of a longer-term strategic plan, because if we were to set a strategic plan with goals set for 2030, we would be incredibly foolish because it's 2024 and things change. So having annual measurable objectives is important. The flexibility that that gives us extends the shelf life of a strategic plan that is based on our values and our core beliefs. As you'll see tonight, we don't hit all our goals. And when the team met for the first time last year, my challenge to them was set goals that we're not going to meet all of them. It would be really easy for us to set goals and sit here and tell you how good we are. It's much more of a challenge to set lofty goals and say, we fell short here, here's why, and here's what we're going to do. So when you see these goals, we did this on purpose. And when we talk about pushing ourselves to our edge, as good as we are today, we're going to be better next year. And we're going to continue to improve each and every year. So as we do this, and I told the team today, this is what I challenged you to do. Set goals we can't meet. And we have to continue to say, yeah, we're going to set lofty goals and we're going to get there. And if we miss, we're going to get better. Also, some of the goals we set after the levy with the responsible staffing plan, we have to shift some of those goals. When we talk about how we're going to go through a hiring process, and then we say, wait a second, we might not be hiring as much, it changes our goals when it comes to hiring. So as we look at that process, of course we changed because things happen pretty quick. We're in an ever-changing period, and we need that flexibility. When we look at our engagement goal, we had a director of community engagement, and when she decided to go into the private sector, we said no, as part of the responsible staffing plan, we're not replacing that position, but we're going to redistribute those responsibilities among 3 or 4 other people. The one thing I don't think we counted on, but it fits exactly with 2030, is our 5-year forecast, our budget needs, the levy cycle, and as we heard at our last board meeting and as we hear in our focus groups, levy fatigue. So as we implement a responsible staffing plan, the long-term stability of the district in terms of financial security is something that we balance when we look at increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of what we do. And we can always find ways to be both more efficient and effective without having a negative impact on the student experience. Any questions? I have 2 recommendations, and at the request of a couple board members, they're broken out into 2 separate policy approval items, and they are the first group and the second group that I will be asking for your support for second reading and vote to change the policies.
It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the attached revised policies. This is the first batch. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Valentine. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. It's recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the attached revised policies, second batch. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
De Silva.
It's Mrs. De Silva, yes. As I'm looking at you, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Questions or comments?
I have some comments on these policies. So Mrs. Messick is new to the board, and I would like to just go over the process and some of the facts around these particular policies, and some notes that I have taken too. So first, I would just like to say that the Ohio School Board's Code of Ethics requires school board members to work with other members to establish effective board policies, and creating policy is one of the board's main statutory duties. During the policy committee meeting on January 30th, 2023, the building administrators who serve on the committee were asked to share their opinions on the writing style of the policies as submitted by Neola at the time. One principal stated that the use of the style using the actual noun makes it easier to follow due process when reading the long text of some policies, and the other building administrators agreed. During the February 13th, 2023 school board meeting, the superintendent asked for direction from the board on the style of the policies. The board, by a majority vote of 3-2, approved the existing policy style, going forward as voted on during the February 13th meeting. You can reference the recording on the district's YouTube channel. The last line of the school board members' code of ethics states, "I express my personal opinions, but once the board has acted, accept the will of the majority." In regards to policy 8600.04, bus driver certification, the policy made changes to the wording of policy to add language consistent with Ohio code. For example, the use of the word vehicle instead of van. It also uses the noun driver instead of the pronouns he or she. As I stated during the policy committee meeting on May 7th, 2024, Ohio Revised Code Section 3327.10, qualifications of drivers states, for example, no person employed as a driver of a school bus or motor van under this section who's convicted of a traffic violation or who has the person's commercial driver's license suspended shall drive a school bus or motor van until the person has filed a written notice of the conviction, or a school bus or motor van until the person has filed a written notice of the conviction or suspension as follows. There are no pronouns used in the code, just nouns. In regard to policy 2623, student assessment and academic intervention services, it references several sections of Ohio Revised Code. I printed out section 3301.0711, all 17 pages of it, if you would like to read it. It's called Administration and Grading of Assessments, and it says it was also effective October 3rd, 2023, under legislation House Bill 33. And it uses the nouns person and student throughout all 17 pages. I did not find a single use of the pronouns he or she or his or her. In regard to policy 8660, incidental transportation of students by private vehicle, the policy was updated to reflect the updated policies and forms it references. And the first line of the 6th paragraph was changed to no person shall be permitted to transport students if the person does not possess and maintain automobile liability and personal injury insurance in the amount required by district administrative guidelines. Ohio Revised Code Section 4509.101, operating of motor vehicle without proof of financial responsibility, which is effective October 3rd, 2023, under legislation House Bill 33. No person shall operate or permit the operation of a motor vehicle in the state unless proof of financial responsibility is maintained continuously throughout the registration period with respect to that vehicle, or in the case of a driver who is not the owner with respect to that driver's operation of that vehicle. Again, no pronouns he, she, or his, hers are used in the code. All the proposed changes to the policies on the agenda are aligned with language in the Ohio Revised Code and have been recommended by the Superintendent's Policy Review Committee to the Superintendent, who in turn has recommended them to the Board for approval. As a reminder, the Policy Review Committee meetings include legal counsel, 2 board members, 3 building principals, 1 from each level, the deputy superintendent, and administrative assistant. Past concerns around policy have been around confusion around the pronouns they, them, theirs. You'll find that there is not that language present in the proposed policies on the agenda today. And as far as the he, she, or he, or hers, or other pronouns, while the proposed changes do not change the substance of the policies, they all align with Ohio Revised Code and common legal language. The principals have also stated, as I mentioned before, that the use of the actual noun is clearer than using he or she throughout the policy. Lastly, it has been suggested in the past that the current style of writing is perhaps politically motivated. However, as I just read Ohio Revised Code, and we happen to have, everyone knows the makeup of our Ohio legislator. So since they are using it, I doubt that it is, a political thing. So the fact of the matter is that the language has been used for various professional fields for decades and is common practice. And in conclusion, the public and DCS teachers and staff and students and community rely on the board to establish effective policy. And as board members, we are not being called to vote on the writing style of the policies tonight. Tonight, we are being called to vote on the substance of the policies. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. De Silva. Any further questions or comments?
I forget the date of the meeting that we originally had this, and I think at that time that my statements were pretty thorough in regards to my conversations with Neola, the reasons behind my position, and why I continue to vote the way that I do. I've respected the will of the majority in terms of how we voted and have obviously gone along with it without additional comment, but I still feel very strongly. I pulled up my comments from that evening, and what I said then, I still feel now. Having done this for 20 plus years, I get that we all have different opinions that we bring. We represent different views, and that's a part of being a team of 5. So I think I'll leave my comments there. I appreciate the work that you guys do on policy committee. I know that it is some of the more intensive work that we do, but I continue to maintain the positions that I previously stated.
Since I'm new to the board, sorry, Mr. Valentine, can you give me your reasons? Because what I'm looking at, I understand that the they, them, there might be, but from what I'm looking at, it just clarifies. So could you give me your point of view of why it does not clarify it better?
Yeah, and I think that as we have this discussion and we can talk about individual policies and use them as an example, there's some fairness in that. However, I mean, if we're going to have the conversation, I'm going to state what I previously said. We've been now given multiple reasons for these proposed changes. First, it was legal, which wasn't the case from Neola. Then it was the simplicity of reading, which I believe is still debatable and still hasn't been used as a reason by Neola. And Neola being the body that's providing these recommendations. Then the reason from Neola became shifting to gender neutral language. In my opinion, one thing's clear: the stylistic changes weren't due to changes in the law or the simplicity of reading. They were due to the request of some of Neola's clients, which they were very clear about, who are political bodies asking for change. We're paying Neola to help make recommendations, and they won't provide an actual straightforward explanation for these changes. So there was a lot of discussion going back and forth at the time between us and Neola, and they would not give a straightforward answer. So on Wednesday, January 25th, at the request of the board, a representative from the school district asked our Neola rep, many policies in this update have similar changes, with pronouns being removed. We had a first reading of policies on a Board of Education agenda and had public comments, concerns regarding this issue. A few board members are questioning why these changes have been made. That's a quote. The Neola from an email. The Neola rep responded, "The pronoun changes are our attorneys updating Neola policies to make them more gender neutral. As future updates roll out, the references to gender neutrality will continue. With that said, if your board is opposed to making the pronoun changes, the board can choose to leave the pronouns as is." Our double representative stated, "I understand we can choose not to accept Neola's changes. However, I've been asked to inquire if the Neola attorneys are now taking a political stance when guiding us in updates for policy and guideline. Thoughts?" Neola rep responded, "Here's a response to your question about pronouns and policy from my boss. We've been asked by clients to purge the pronoun issue and updates moving forward. There is no political issue there, just responding to client demands. It is always an option for the client to accept or reject suggestions offered by Neola and updates and templates. We'll process and post whatever clients adopt." So I went on for some additional comments. Again, I respect the fact that we have the ability to accept or reject, and in this case, the majority accepts that, and we'll continue on. But in the same way that I believe each person, and in particular Mrs. De Silva, has the right and ability to represent a part of our community with her views, I feel the same in my position, and so that is why I've stated what I've stated.
I represent the entire community, just to be clear.
Yeah, I didn't. Not trying to say that you don't represent the entire community. I'm saying it's a viewpoint that is represented within the community.
My question would be, so you have no issue with the content, but because of wording changing on gender, which now makes it more clear because it uses a direct noun, such as student, instead of his, her.
Correct.
That is the issue. It has nothing to do with content.
Correct. Nothing to do with content. Yep.
And, you know, the only other, I guess, thing I would add, going back, because you had asked Mrs. Messick about, you know, the kind of the history and how we got here, and when Mr. Valentine did, you know, inquire about, is this a legal reason? What is the reason for the language change? You know, when all of these policies are coming at us and all of a sudden the gender is completely removed, there were policies, even dating back to December of 2023, where the use of the word "there" was substituted in place of a singular, you know, a singular person. And so I questioned those at that time. Those policies are now in place, and the wording is there for those particular policies. And again, that was just December of 2023. So now we have another batch of policies where we are looking again at the same issue where.
I don't think it's the same issue. I'm sorry, but using they, them, their is not the same as using a direct noun.
Why is it not?
Because it clarifies. This is much more accessible and easy to read than using his, her, or she, he. It clarifies exactly who in the policy you are referring to.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that in December of 2023, when we reviewed the changes, this is post-change, and these were some of the substitutions that were made in language. So it wasn't just removing he, she, it was in place substituting they, them. We have approved those policies. So they are in, it. You know, they were voted on. Right, but I'm just saying for clarification, because what I think it does is just muddy the waters. When you do all of these things to sidestep,
he, she language in a policy, then you have policies that are inconsistent, because dating back to just the ones that we approved in December of 2023, they go by a different standard, because the word they and their was used in place of a singular pronoun. So I realize these are different, but my greater point to this is when you make those substitutions and you are trying to avoid language that is natural and consistent with an individual person, then it becomes arbitrary. And our policies should not be arbitrary. Our policies should be consistent. They should be concise. So I think the redundancy of always saying the employee, the driver, the students, over and over and over again, when the natural common sense language is just to refer to that person as he, she, as it has been for a very, very long time, and it as is in our student handbooks that we are voting on tonight. So I do think that absent a legal reason, there was a political motivation to make changes like this, to remove all gender from our policy language. And I don't think that our policies should move with the political times. I think they should be consistent, concise, and not arbitrary, and you know, be able to kind of stand the test of time, no matter who's sitting in these seats.
If I may add one more thing. I printed off the Ohio Revised Code, and like I said, there's no use of pronouns. These are the most recent version, but I look back before, you know, probably 10 years ago, they still were gender neutral. They still use the same language. This is just the kind of language that the legal field uses. And quite honestly, I think our policies were just outdated, and that's why they still said he, she.
But just for context, the question was, could we give some history of the background for Mrs. Messick?
I think there's one other important thing I want to say, Amy, and that is, and I noted this at that meeting, typically Neola provides an explanation sheet when they provide recommendations for changes. In this case, they did not provide any recommendation sheet as to, or any they did not acknowledge this within any communication to boards as they sent this out as well. So I think I understand the viewpoint that you're coming from. I just want to make sure that you understand another part of the component for me.
I just want to make it clear that I just truly believe it's a different issue based on the fact that it's not about making it gender neutral necessarily. It's about clarification of terms on these. And I do not see a correlation between what happened in 2023 and these new documents.
So the only part of that for me that I would agree with you, notwithstanding the fact that we were asked to adopt policy 6700 around breastfeeding and nursing mothers, and there was no acknowledgement of females within that policy.
I have a question on all of this in terms of, because we don't disagree with the context and because it is important to go through and update our policies, what happens if one of us is not sitting here for a family reason or whatever, and we do want the context of the policy to go forward? I think that's where I'm kind of at a crossroad, where I absolutely respect every single person sitting here, but I would like to kind of have a path forward where we are expressing our beliefs, but I don't ever want to see us, after all the hard work that goes into policy committee, see us sitting here not passing policies that the context absolutely makes sense for our district, not be passed over our personal desires. And so I don't know that we're going to have an answer for that at this very second, but it would be very helpful to find a medium so that doesn't happen, just because of all of the hard work that you guys put into this on our policy committee.
I agree with that, and that's why I ended my statement with, we are called to vote on the substance, in my opinion. This is how I approach it. We're called to vote on the substance of the policies. And I would not like to see a policy that is needed by our district fail because, like you said, if one of us isn't here for no good reason, in my opinion.
I tell you, if we were in that position, and this is just me personally, I would look to, obviously if it's avoidable ahead of time, recognizing where we likely are based off a conversation and previous voting. I'd have no problem tabling or moving something in a rare circumstance where that happens. I know where you're trying to ultimately go because we've had some conversations about this, and I remain willing to listen to ideas, but I personally obviously have expressed where I fall, and I hope that we aren't in that spot.
Okay. With all that being said, let's, if no one else has any more questions or comments, I would like to move forward with a vote. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
That's
yes, you're right.
We just need a vote.
You're right.
Just need to call the roll.
That was long, sorry.
No problem. You ready?
Can you call the roll, please? Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
No.
Mr. Valentine,
No.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 3-2. Reports and action items from the treasurer's office.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Just not much on the agenda, the standard stuff. We do have some donations this evening. Some of them are pretty AEP generous to the Kaufman Robotics Club, $1,500 to the Kaufman Tennis Hitting Wall, and the Glacier Ridge PTO. The Blooms is a parent communication method that the building uses. So for that, student activity purpose clause for your approvals, Kaufman High School Model UN Club. We have our annual baseball field maintenance workers. I have not received the names for Kaufman yet. That's why you only see Jerome and Scioto. And then lastly, we have the May financial report on here. This represents, when you're looking at the general fund, comparing the estimates to actuals, the May update of the 5-year forecast. As you can see, we're online, slightly doing better than expected at this point. We do have finishing up in here in June with our last month of fiscal year as we move into next year, July 1, starting our new fiscal year. So any questions this evening?
If there are no questions, it is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 7B through 7E. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Messick. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gillis. I already said you.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Okay, this evening our team has a summary for you of the Journey 2030 goals. We will keep this brief, and if you have any questions at the end, feel free to raise them for us. As a reminder, we rolled out these goals last August or September. We gave you a mid-year update in February, and now we're going to wrap up the year. You'll hear from us again this coming August when we roll out the 2024-2025 goals. So I'm going to turn it right over to Mrs. Marple.
Thank you, Dr. Schwanke. Here you can see a graphic representing our academic foundation goal of early literacy. Highlights in early literacy this year include implementation of our DIBELS 8 screener in grades K through 3, and also some revision of our literacy support qualifiers. This allowed us to better align our intervention to the specific reading needs of individual students. And we also provided professional development for teachers and staff around early literacy data from DIBELS 8, as well as instruction that acts upon this data. So you can see that our district third grade reading map data indicates no significant increase or decrease this spring, but our team continues to monitor this and other data points. And we are encouraged by the data that we're seeing relating to foundational reading data points, not necessarily reflected in this MAP data, and the results that we are seeing in our buildings with our students. So we hope to incorporate DIBELS 8 data, which focuses on those early literacy skills specifically, in our goals for 24-25, and believe this work will, over time, transfer to greater literacy growth with our students. And then, as we shift to our 612 Pathways goal, we can report that over 70% of our 2024 graduates completed 2 of our identified success measures. Additionally, we made significant revisions to our middle school experience to ensure that students gain experiential learning opportunities as they approach their high school years so that they are prepared to make these decisions in their schedule. We continue to focus on professional learning for our staff in regards to pathways and continue to embed opportunities into our curriculum for our students. I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Andres to talk about student experience.
Thank you. Our 2 goals under student experience looked at well-rounded education and physical and mental wellness. And although we did not meet our well-rounded goal, I am happy to report that we did make progress in that goal with an increase of 2 percentage points to just over 81% of students meeting graduation requirements and earning at least 1 local seal. So over 800 of our graduates earned the Student Engagement Seal, over 400 earned the Fine and Performing Arts Seal, but just around 20 or 25 earned the Community Service Seal. And knowing the great work that our kids do in this community, I think that tells us that a student needs 80 hours during their high school career. And I think that shows one of our action steps of doing a better job of refining our tracking systems and continuing to educate students and staff on this seal. So we should see an increase in that area in the future. Our second goal in student experience examined supportive relationships as reported by students in grades 3 through 12. We ask students 3 questions. If they have a friend they can count on, a family member they can count on, or a teacher or the other adult from school that they can count on. And again, while we did not meet our goal, we did make another 2-point improvement. About 95% of our students report yes to having a family member they can count on. About 90% report yes to a friend, and about 85% report yes to an adult from school. At the elementary level, we saw a small gain in the teacher or other adult from school area between the spring of 23 and 24. But it was the secondary level where we saw the biggest gains, nearly 1% increases in the family and friends area, and almost a 2% increase in the adult at school that they can count on. These 2 goals, well-rounded education and physical mental wellness, they go hand in hand because students who report strong adult and peer support are more likely to be engaged and motivated in school, especially for our diverse students. So action steps that we take for one goal should complement and help improve the other goals, the other goal in the future. And I'll pass to Mr. Bielny.
Good evening. Under partnerships and networking, we had 2 goals. The first one surrounded staff development, recruitment, and retention. Our goal was that 7% of staff who applied to Dublin City Schools self-identified as being ethnically diverse. Our goal was to try to increase that number of high-quality, ethnically diverse certified staff recruited and interviewed by 5%. One of the things Dr. Marchhausen shared is that with our responsible staffing plan, so our number of people that we typically interview last year compared to this year. So last year at this time, we had interviewed 507 people. This year at this point in time, we're at 163. So in light of just where we are, our number of 7% has stayed steady. So we have not increased that goal by 5%. We continue to monitor it, and again, this is self-report. So this was a goal that we would hope would increase by 5%, but we stayed steady at 7% from last year to this year. And then moving on to our next goal. The second part of partnerships and networking is really around community engagement. And again, this is an area that we've had some shifts in this year. You'll notice in the gray box some of the additions. So we started with DCSU, Dublin City Schools University. We've made some shifts away from that. But we now have open public participation at our work sessions. Pathway Options Night was very successful. We have a blog that Ms. Dietrich's team is working through, and then Stroll Magazine. So one of the things that around this goal that we attempted to do this year was to increase participation, to increase engagement by 20%. This is one of those goals, quite honestly, that's very difficult to measure. With so many events that happen in Dublin City Schools, trying to get an accurate number of who's participating and then what does engagement look like. These are one of two goals that we're going to be altering for next school year, but one of the things that we do feel good about is that some of our shifts this year indicate that people are engaged. It's just different than what we started out the school year with. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stark.
I have one quick question.
Go ahead.
Could you refresh my memory on what Stroll Magazine is?
Stroll Magazine is a neighborhood-based magazine. There's one in Muirfield Village and there's one in Tartan. And so we write articles for those magazines. So we connected with the editors of those magazines, and we write articles that specifically target those neighborhoods. So a great example is when Deer Run's roof started to go south and we decided to put that as an emergency vote on the board agenda, we wrote an article about that and about Deer Run because all of their students live in Muirfield Village. And so it's another way for us to connect with those constituents who haven't always been the easiest for us to reach in the district. And we're looking at other opportunities to do that in other neighborhoods as well. So it's part of what my team is doing this summer, is trying to figure out where do people in Concord Township get their news? Where do people down in the city of Columbus area? So we have a great relationship with City of Dublin. John talks about it, or Dr. Marshausen talks about it a lot. But we're trying to figure out how do we connect with our other municipalities.
And Mrs. De Silva, since you paused us there, thank you. I wanted to add a little bit to what Mr. Boney said. We really looked at this goal and decided, quite frankly, it didn't measure what we were looking to measure. We know our families are incredibly engaged. We know they go a lot to their child's school. We know that they want to come to central events if it's about their child's future or current situation. And so to say, well, let's look at how many people come to a centralized event doesn't capture the thousands and thousands and thousands of parents that come to our school events. And quite frankly, that's what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud that our schools are so open and have many evening events throughout the day and so on. So I think communication is a piece of it, partnerships is a piece of it. We've hired Jen Hinderer to help us with our pathways and partnerships going forward. And then I think engagement, how our families get information, receive it, and what they do with it is part of it. So you will see in August, this is going to look quite different, and we think that's sound thinking going forward. Mr. Stark, back to you. Not back to you, over to you.
So I'm a little different. My goals are spelled out for the next 3 summers. And basically that is to fulfill the bond promises that we made to the community. We have 40+ projects. So we are very busy. Let me say we are very, very busy. And you'll see up here, this is our plan. Next summer will probably be one of the busiest summers we've ever had. And our commitment is to get everything done by August of '26. So we're top loading next summer because some of these plans that we're doing, especially things that might deal with stormwater like tracks and tennis courts and things such of that nature, if it becomes a problem with the city and we slide, it would slide over to the next year. But we're hoping not to do that. We have full court press on all of these things right now. And you'll see that tonight we have a large agenda. A lot of it is hiring designers to get these projects done. And you'll see at our next meeting, we're going to be hiring an owner's representative to help us with about 4 of these projects next year, because they all need coordination together, just as it's kind of like an extension of our staff for one summer. It won't be a head count, it'll just be an owner's representative to help us through this push we have over the next summer. So right now, things are on schedule, on budget. This summer, if you look around the neighborhoods, we have 7 playgrounds under construction. They're being ripped out. Every one of them, I think, has already been ripped out. And Riverside should be completed first, but I know that Indian Run already has a new playground. It's not completely installed, but it's there. You'll find also that when they look done, they won't be done. First comes rip out, then comes the the new playground, then comes the flooring, but everything should be done. And our turf is going to be starting early for Scioto and Jerome. It's supposed to start next week, but they're actually going to be here Wednesday, starting at Scioto and then Jerome. So again, what you'll see, what my updates will be more about where we're at and if there's any problems or concerns, but so far we remain on schedule. Dr. Schwanke.
Okay, then the last piece is planning for future growth. And we've talked quite a bit in board meetings about future plans to do redistricting at the elementary level in the schools of around the area of Glacier Ridge, Penny, Depp, and Deer Run. So we are working with Cropper GIS, who's beginning to look at maps and create some options. We don't know what those are yet, but in end of August, we will have an open community session. Excuse me, no, in late August, it is a Zoom webinar for any community member to come and share their thoughts. And at that time, Cropper will present the process, criteria, timeline, and so on. At the end of October, there will be an on-site meeting that will be held at Jerome High School to get public comment and feedback. Now, it's important to note that Cropper is building a website that will be linked to our website, and there will be 24/7 opportunities for people to provide their feedback and their insight throughout this process. So folks will have a lot of chances to weigh in. Final recommendations of the redistricting will be provided to the Board of Education in early December. So that's what's happening with the Journey 2030 goals. I really want to applaud the team for the massive amount of work that went into this. They all have developed committees and gotten input from principals, from teachers, and from members of their team. So there's a lot of discussion about this, a lot of meetings, a lot of thinking. And so thank you all for your work on that. Questions for the Board of Education?
I do have
Yes.
one. Can I just ask, how are we trying to hire more diverse employees? Because I know that that's where we missed the mark quite a bit. Are we going out to HBCUs? Are we actively recruiting for them to find us, find Dublin, and want to work here?
Yeah, Ms. Messick, that's one of the things that, we are doing some of that. I will say that we have not gone to an HBCU event since COVID, quite honestly. Right before that happened, we did go down to Tennessee and visited, and we're also using a couple subscriptions to like diversity.com. There's an organization called NIMNet. So some of those organizations that specifically target individuals that are ethnically diverse, that are interested in teaching, we work with those places just to advertise. And I think that, one of the things I think has become a little bit of a challenge for us too is as we're looking at where our openings, so for this year, most of our openings, or I'd say the majority of them, were Mr. Andres's area, and so student support services, so school psychs, intervention specialist, those positions. So it's one more layer of trying to really find those individuals that are interested in coming to Dublin, who might have an interest in being part of the district. So, right now we're still looking at other options, but some of the feedback from those places, we haven't really been very successful in getting a lot of applicants from there, and it's also self-report too. So there could be times when we have people that do see our advertisements through those places that may not report, because not everybody self-reports.
And just to clarify, Mrs. Messick, you weren't here when this goal was established, but it is actually, the goal is around increasing the diversity of the applicant pool,
Right.
not really a hiring
Right.
goal.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, and we'll be back in August with more Journey 2030. I have something else, I'm sorry. You will also see on this evening's agenda, we have the handbooks, the second reading of the elementary and secondary student handbooks on the agenda tonight for approval. Any questions on the handbooks? Thank you, Mrs. De Silva, for your keen eye. I believe you were doing some proofreading while your daughter was taking the ACT, so thank you for that. We did, by the way, take out some of the academic items that were in there, and because they belong in the academic handbook. So that was a change this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 9A and 9B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Chief Operating Officer comments.
I have 10 items. So all of these items I did put in my board report. So what I'm going to do, I'll just kind of go through these rather quickly. However, if at any time you have a question or concern, just stop me or ask at the end. So the first item is we're recommending to the board that we proceed with contracting CTL Engineering, and this is for the 2025 asphalt parking lots. This is a bond project to redo the Jerome and Scioto High School parking lots. The next one is we're asking for, these are all designers that we're hiring to get the projects going, is for the new elevators that we promised during the bond project. This is the, these elevators are for Emerald Campus, Sells Middle School, Kaufman High School, Scioto High School, and we're requesting that the board hire Kramer Engineering for a contract worth about $160,000 to do that work. Next one is for tennis courts. This is we're asking the Kleinagers Group to be hired for a contract worth about $261,000, and this is for tennis courts at Davis, Grizel, Carr, and Jerome. The next item for approval is we're looking to hire Prater Engineering for a contract worth about $300,000, and this is for part bond, part PI. So the bond piece is the Scioto High School. They have a number of HVAC pieces that we wanted to replace, and that would be designed this year, bid out this year, but the project wouldn't start until 2026 because some of the items that we would need have almost a year lead time. And then there's a couple of permanent improvement projects because they fall into the HVAC category, and that's at Wright Elementary, replacing their the boilers and chillers there, and Carr Middle School needs domestic water heaters. That's a bit of a mixed bag. Next one is the approval to continue with the Davis roof. So I explained about the Davis roof. We fell into some unexpected design problems, and we decided to split it into two projects because not only would it save us money by bidding out what would have been a huge change order without any type of procurement, but the items we need is a special plywood that comes out of Oregon, and we would not get it here by this school year. So by breaking it into two, they'll finish the first project now, and we want to continue with Mays Consultant on this. Mays has done a really good job by us. They're also the ones who's designed the Dare Run roof, and they've done some other work with us. Very, very good. So this basically continues the process. They'll put together another bid package, and they'll continue to do the construction administration for us on that. The next item is our annual renewal for the high school, middle school, school resource officers with the City of Dublin. And this is an annual contract. This is worth about $356,000. The increase is 3.5%, which is basically their labor increase. And this would give us school resource officers for another school year. The next is a resolution for maintenance vehicles. So we have, besides buses, we have quite a bit of fleet, maintenance and grounds and things like that. And we don't update them as often because they don't get as many miles. But what we did here is we did a bit of a cleanup of items that are in the yard that we're going to fix. They never got fixed. We're kind of cleaning up the yard. We do a huge trade-in. And what we're going to get is 4 cargo vans. And this is something new, but this is actually working with our classified staff. This is what they've requested. It's a really good idea. Instead of pickup trucks, the cargo staffs can fill your stuff with all your tools, everything else, and then it'll re-update their fleet. And you'll see most of our trade-ins, I think the great majority of them are 10, 15 years old. And that's for about $156,000. Next item is about Dare Run. It's having the board require urgent, so the board in February required urgent necessity for the roof and the floors there. This gives us urgent necessity for some abatement work that needs to be done in conjunction with this work. And this would allow us to hire Hine Environmental under this urgent necessity resolution for about $63,000 to continue with all this abatement work. And this resolution, unlike the ones earlier tonight, where there's a contract in place, allows us to move forward with putting them under contract, which we'd hope to get done pending board approval by end of this week. The next one is also part of Dare Run. So when the board approved the floors earlier this year, we had a certain scope. After we found out what type of abatement work needed, the gym floor fit into that. And since we're going to have everyone mobilized there right now, we thought this would be the best time to do that. And that's a change order of about $43,000. And lastly, this is approval for the district's property and liability coverage. Quite a bit of work on this. I want to thank Mr. Kern for all his help in doing this with us. We work with Gallagher, that's our insurance consultant, and they have checked the field, and they were very creative this year. So Liberty Mutual, who's our current provider, still has the best coverage, but the creativity is that our crime coverage we moved to Hanover, and our cyber crime coverage we moved to Palomar. Both not only give us a decrease in cost, but increased our coverage materially. And so this is altogether, it's about $1.4 million. And the reason it's such an increase over last year is our policies are typically 12 months, and we're going to make this policy 15 months. The reason behind that is the insurance companies that do schools, they don't start putting together packages for all the schools because it's all in one category until the end of a school year. So by the time we were to do a bid or find out new prices, we usually get it around this time, and our coverage expires at the end of this month. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to understand it, socialize it with the board, and figure out where we can do better. A 15-month cycle puts us where our new insurance will end at September 30th. The process would still take place this time of year, but we can start working on it in May and June, see what our options are, and have a more methodical process on whether we should change or not. So that was an awful lot. I want to go back to any which ones you have, any questions you have, or concerns or thoughts. Or
I just have a comment while everyone is thinking. I just want to say I really appreciate your weekly reports and all the information and detail that you put into them.
Thank you.
We have so many projects, and they're complex projects, but you explain everything, and it makes
thank
sense,
you so much.
and I really appreciate that.
I just had one question on the Deer Run floor.
Yes.
And the abatement. Is it just precautionary? Were there things in the abatement that you noticed, and that's why the floor, the gymnasium floor? I mean, is it asbestos? Is it something that you're thinking?
So there was there was asbestos found, but again, it's a building. It's a 1980 building. So buildings that were made before 1986, it's very, very common to have asbestos in there. It's not dangerous because it's just part of the building material. The reason you want it professionally abated is because if it's taken out the wrong way, that's where it could become dangerous. So Hine Environmental is a very reputable firm. We knew because this is an older building, we found that the gym floor, we were planning on replacing the gym floor in the next 5 or 6 years. But however, since we found that it has some of the same material, and since we're going to mobilize right now with Hine and we have get everything's lined up, we decided to just do it right now.
I'd also like to thank Cassie and Mr. Stark. When you remove a playground in the summer, parents complain that you're removing their playground and their kids play at the playground. Now's the time you would remove a playground because we're not using it every day. So for our community members who are concerned, we'll get them done as quickly and safely as possible so they can be back up for use. But this is when we replace playgrounds. Also, for our construction crews that are working, we have contracts with our construction crews that meet within the City of Dublin's guidelines of when construction can take place, which I believe is 7A to 9P. When we bid those contracts, we don't tell the contractor when to work and when not to work. So, for example, on the Deer Run roof, the fact that they were working over the weekend to get the roof done, we don't have control over that. When we bid the contract, we give them a time frame, and we expect it done by the date that it needs to be done. And if a contractor's looking at the long-term forecast and they think we can knock this out because it's going to be cool this weekend and our guys can be up on the roof and can get a lot done, we understand that there are neighbors who don't like someone on the roof working on a Saturday. But for us, we issue the contract and don't tell them when to work. So thanks to Cassie and Jeff for fielding some unhappy resident complaints, and we provide information and provide the contracts to them. But for a school district in the summer, we've got from Memorial Day till August 1st to get an awful lot done. And our contractors, Mr. Stark and his Chicago approach gets them to the deadline when they need to get done, which we all appreciate. So thank you both, and we'll continue to communicate with neighbors and be good neighbors.
Yes.
But
Pardon our dust.
yeah, but please pardon our dust, exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Stark, for the continued detailed information is much appreciated. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 11A through 11J. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Human Resources.
All right, I will be brief tonight. I'll start with our certified agenda, and the first part of it, you'll see 2 administrative salary changes, and these are on to better reflect the level of work that these 2 individuals are currently performing. You'll see several new hires on tonight's agenda, and we're kind of in the throes right now of getting ready for next school year. We're down to 7 positions to fill, and then we'll be 100% staffed, so we're glad about that. The next few items are related to summer work for our staff. This has been on several of the past agendas, and this is a work in progress, trying to make sure that we have summer staff in place to help us finish that out. You'll see a leave of absence on this section, and then all the supplementals that are on tonight's are for fall sports and athletics as well. The classified agenda, there's 9 resignations. You'll also see 8 new hire recommendations. And just like in the certified agenda, there's language and recommendations for classified staff to also work throughout, or to work through the summer as well. The final item is a stipend, and there is a single stipend on tonight, and that's for work that was performed at Dublin Scioto this past school year, and it was inadvertently omitted from an earlier agenda, so it's on tonight to make sure the staff member is paid for work that was done. And that's all that I have tonight.
Thank you. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 13A through 13C. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Silva, Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Future agenda items? No. If no, we're moving to executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22. We will go into executive session to consider specialized details of security arrangements. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Valentine?
Second.
Second, Ms. Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. And just to note, no action will be taken after executive session, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.